Wonderful. And Jennifer, if you'll go to the next slide. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am not your official kickoff for this committee. We will let the three co-leads do that. But just as a couple reminders, since we are on Zoom, I am Amanda Ellis, the Associate VP over K-12 policies and programs at CPE, and I'm so happy to be able to facilitate this today and help organize the Commonwealth Education Continuum. This is an exciting time for so many folks to come to the table, but this is just the beginning of collaborative work. And so I just want to touch really briefly. You'll see the agenda on the screen of what we're going to be doing today, and hopefully to keep you engaged in the work, and that the time will pass quickly and you feel like there's some outcomes that come today and you will provide us guidance with next steps. So we'll hit on the purpose, our meeting norms, our objective for this year. We definitely want to set measurable objectives for the year. We're going to look at some data today just to start our conversation, and areas of opportunity. That will be the feedback that comes from you, where you would like to see things go, and the next steps. And so just a couple of reminders, since we are virtual, make sure and mute if you're not talking, or maybe check your phones. I went on and went silent just in case, so it wouldn't go off in the middle of any time I'm presenting. But there is no judgment if they're barking or anything that happens. That has happened to me plenty of times, and we are very aware of all of our different settings. Also, we don't have any set aside breaks, but please feel free to step away as needed. If you need to stand or take a stretch or need a bio break, please feel free to do so. That works best for you. If possible, keep your video on just so we can stay engaged as a group. It is a large group, but you will have so many unique perspectives to bring to the table. We want to make sure we engage you. And the other thing I just want to make you aware of is that we are filming this on YouTube. We're making this available for the public. We definitely want folks to know what we're talking about and engage in this. I cannot tell you the momentum that this collaboration has, and I know that our leaders will speak of that. So I will stop talking. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to President Aaron Thompson to provide the welcome. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Amanda. What a good day. It's a day that I've been wanting to have for a long time. And I want to thank each of you for being a part of it. When we were sitting down, the Lieutenant Governor and the Commissioner and I, thinking about all the folk we can have on this, what we figured out is that it was only a minuscule number that we can manage to start out with. Just know this is going to be open for a lot of input. But I do want to thank our parents and families for allowing us to serve their students, both in P-12 as well as higher ed. And I know each of you feel the same way. And in a few minutes, you'll have an opportunity to really chime in. We got a good group of folk to start off with, and you'll once again be identified, and you'll in fact get your opportunity to say stuff now as well as later. But and in a little bit also, we'll hear from Commissioner Glass, but we want to get this started by introducing to you a champion of this group and one of the co-leads of this group. And this is our Lieutenant Governor. She's serving in this role, though, in the capacity of the Secretary for Education and Workforce Development. In all the roles she serves, she heavily focuses on what it takes to really have a comprehensive cradle-to-career public education and job training system that produces Kentucky's future leaders. And for this, I'm really blessed to be able to actually work with her. I'm blessed to be able to work with her, period, because she is someone, when we get into these discussions about all the things we can do, she's as passionate as I know I am and as I know that many of you are. So without a doubt, I'm happy, Lieutenant Governor, you're choosing to be one of the leads with us. And without further ado, I'm going to let you jump in and tell us what you think we should be doing with this group.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. And I want to make sure that I say thank you for spearheading this work. None of this would have been possible without your vision. And I think what you said is right, is we have the right players in place. And there's no better time than the present to do this work that we've all wanted to do for so long. I say that we have the superfecta of education. We have an administration that is pro-public education. We have a commissioner who we did a national search for and was selected. We have CPE leader who is one of the national leaders right here in Kentucky. We have a great Board of Education that we know will support this work, and who's one of the strongest boards in the nation as well. So we're really lucky, and I'm honored to be a part of this process. It's exciting. It's an exciting opportunity for all of us who, as Dr. Thompson said, are very passionate about education. And we all share the same belief that every child in Kentucky has the right to a high quality education, regardless of their zip code or any other determinant in their lives. And this continuum will help to make that a reality. That's what we're here to do. We all share the same goals, but so often you hear CPE and State Board of Education and KDE and pre-K, and sometimes we all work within our own circle of interest or our own circle of influence. But this continuum allows us to do what the governor and I love to do, which is shatter those silos and bring people together to help solve the biggest challenges that we face. And this is certainly one of them, if not the one. And as we work to close these gaps and to help knock down the barriers that prevent our kids from having the most opportunity that they possibly can, I know that our passion is going to be reflected in that transformational change that we are able to create for Kentucky families. So all of you are here today because you represent, as shareholders, every corner and every level of education in our Commonwealth. You all are the experts. You have such a deep set of knowledge around the folks that you serve and the level of education that you represent. And so I want you to know this is just the start. We are just getting started. We want to make sure that we're able to create a collaborative, inclusive, comprehensive group of educators from across Kentucky. And I can tell you this, without a shadow of a doubt, with your help, I know that we are going to be able to take advantage of every opportunity we can to improve kids' lives in Kentucky. So I'm grateful that you joined us, and I want to introduce somebody who has helped make all of this possible. I've said it so many times that this administration is an education first administration. And that would not be possible if we did not have Governor Beshear. This continuum is just one example of putting our money where our mouth is. And I'm so thankful to have his support in doing this. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Governor Andy Beshear.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Governor Coleman, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm happy to join this distinguished group this afternoon to talk about one of our top priorities, education. It's been a difficult year, but on Friday, I was happy to join education and health leaders at Broadbent Arena as more than 1,000 educators and school support staff received their shot of hope so that we can safely get our children back in school full-time while protecting all of those that show up to work on educating them, protecting them, making sure that there is a good experience in that building. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's getting brighter every day. Just over a year ago, when Lieutenant Governor Coleman and I were building out our administration, we were working to find ways to build a better workforce, attract businesses that pay a good living wage, and improve healthcare outcomes for all Kentuckians. And as we made plans to turn these priorities into reality, we returned again and again to a core issue and truth. The need for high quality, accessible, and cohesive public education, and that's got to be a system. We appointed the most experienced and talented members to lead the Kentucky Board of Education and ensure our K through 12 students can succeed in public schools and then transition to college or training programs and ultimately continue on to sustainable and highly rewarding careers. We provided funding for free GEDs, something that resonated with all Kentuckians, to remove the financial barrier so that our folks who wanted to expand opportunities were able to, that they could provide for their families. This is and always will be and Education First administration. We're focused on improving education in every corner of the Commonwealth, but one entity and one agency on its own cannot tackle the many issues facing education in Kentucky. So we were proud to announce the launch of this group, the Commonwealth Education Continuum, and we're glad to see it assemble and focus on educating every Kentucky student from their earliest years through continuing education and as adult learners. The Multi-Agency Consortium is comprised of leadership from early childhood to post-secondary and beyond. Our goal, to find ways to ease educational transition, create a cohesive experience for our students and what we all dream of, to have more opportunities for our families, so many that our kids would never think about going somewhere else. We know there are specific areas along this continuum where we're more likely to lose children and adult learners. The major transition points from pre-K to K through 12, from high school to college or training, and then on to a career. They present many unique challenges for many students. Sometimes students are not adequately prepared to move forward. Sometimes these transitions are daunting or confusing for both students and, me being one now, parents of students. And we know that an achievement gap tied to racial and economic disparities persists, and that it is our obligation and our duty to work with various partners to address it now in our time. A goal, a core value of this administration is to not just acknowledge that these types of issues exist or say they're a problem of the past, but to take active, impactful steps to address them. This continuum will help us do that and should be focused and intentional about increasing and improving the quality and competencies of a diverse teaching workforce. Together, we're going to be able to look at increasing family and student opportunity awareness, targeted mentoring, outreach, and support access across disciplines. So it is crucial for the future of our people and our Commonwealth that we work together across agencies to improve outcomes for our students, and let's eliminate any of these gaps that hinder in the transition. I'd end by saying that the post-COVID world is going to be different. We all crave a return to normalcy, and we all talk about getting back to the normal days. Well, a lot of that's going to be true. We're going to be able to hug our families. We're going to be able to go on vacations. All that we're excited about. But the economy is going to be different. Healthcare is going to be different. And if we want to truly compete, and not just compete, but lead, to take a leap forward on our ability to attract businesses, create great careers, improve quality of life, we got to be ready and recognize that education is going to be different too. I want my kids back in school on an everyday basis, but I know that their education is always going to include that laptop, that there have been skills that they have learned in NTI, study skills that they have learned earlier, discipline and time management that are going to benefit them. So let's remember that as we move forward, we've got to think differently. And the successes that we can have in determining those skills of a post-COVID world and pushing them all the way down to our earliest learners, because some of them already have some advanced work through this pandemic, is a way that we can truly have the best workforce and everything that we could ask to compete. So I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Coleman, Dr. Thompson, Dr. Glass for their leadership and roles in this continuum. We talk about Team Kentucky, and that's exactly what this is. Families out there that just want the best for their children and their education shouldn't feel our bureaucracy of having this group or that group or another group. And we should all be speaking the same language. We should all be singing from the same hymnal, in that whether it's a part that we're in or not, there are places where people fall through the cracks. It ought to be unacceptable to all of us. And our goal shouldn't be to look at somebody else and say, how do you fix this? It ought to be each of us looking and saying, how do we help? One system, intertwined, caring for each and every Kentucky child or adult, realizing that the future is ours to build. Now let's go build it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Governor. We know you're busy, so we appreciate the time you're taking with us. We also appreciate all the things you're doing in our state to make sure that we are actively getting back to good learning as well as keeping our students safe. So thank you so much. First of all, there's so many people to thank.
Dr. Thompson,
we
I just missed one thing if I can.
sure, absolutely.
We are on track on K through 12 to be the very first state in the entire country to vaccinate our educators and those that work in the building. I know that we need many more. Others are going to be in group 1C, but you want to talk about proving that you're putting education first. That's right there. Thank you.
Amen. That's actually really good news because higher education's in 1C. And we know that we have to do that too, right, Dr. Jackson? Dr. Oleka, we've got to get our folk vaccine. So I'm glad our P12 is actually ahead of schedule. There's so many people to thank. I would be remiss if I didn't thank Amanda Ellis and Jennifer Fraker, who, Dr. Glass, thank you for allowing us to steal them away from you, but they're not getting too far away. They are very much a part of this process. The Education Workforce Cabinet staff, we thank you, and the KDE staff, we thank you. So often I've talked about this P20 effort, this pathway process pipeline, and the potholes that we have to fill in order to get people to the end result. Talked about having employers in on the front end, and talked about if you're going to have a strong higher education system, you have to have a stronger early childhood system. This all fits together. And nearly a decade ago, Kentucky's educational leaders, we came together under the first Beshear administration and talked about the Commonwealth commitment. And this was a pledge to work across these P20 lines to provide seamless process from one level to the next. Well, I'm excited about this opportunity now because we get to do it again, but I tell people we're going to do it on steroids this time. We're going to do it at a level that people haven't seen. I'm so excited to have the conversations I've had with our legislators. I see Representative Tipton, I have to call him out, and his lifelong learning chain that he talks about. I'm excited to have students in the middle of this group. How can we do this without hearing their voice? Presidents, we have all kinds of representatives that we know that are crucial to not just for you to put your voice in, but the voice of the people you represent. Now, we're going to be working from our end to focus on certain transition elements from high school into post-secondary campuses. We're going to be working to ensure more students enter college prepared. And we want to make sure that we do what we can to focus on remediation, true enough. And we talked about that under the Commonwealth commitment. This time out, we're also going to make sure that we do our part as a higher education group to work with our P12 counterparts to get more of our students to go to college. And you'll hear some of this later with the data. It is disappointing to see that percent keep falling. We've got to do a better job. But we also will not just focus on increasing the support for academic achievement. We're going to look at the social and emotional and cultural support. Many of you know, and I'd say this without shame, that if we're going to do this work as educators, we have to do it with two main items included. One is quality, the second one is equity. So I'm looking forward to working with my counterparts that's in P12 and the people in the community and those that represent the community to see exactly what are the causes of these persistent gaps, to use our data and analytics in a way that informs us to try to at least put in policy and process to close those. And we're also going to have to do that while building what I call the community around education. We have to have a more diverse workforce. We have to have more diversity in our teaching corps. We have to do everything. If we're going to do it, we have to be purposeful. So today we'll be getting in to identify exactly how we grab these opportunities and look at those challenges in order to facilitate these transitions I'm talking about. And before I turn it back over to Amanda and Jennifer, once again, it's so blessed to have these folks on board. I just want to pick this up and read to you the formal charge of this group. This group's charge is that the Continuum will improve actions to ensure students can equitably earn the necessary degrees and credentials to enter the workforce successfully. And it's just not the quantity, once again, we're talking about. We are talking about the quality of those credentials. In order to do that, we have to have employers with us on the front end, Ashley. We have to have the conversation take place that earlier than we've had before, working with our 7th and 8th graders to help them identify their paths. Not doing tracking, not targeting, but it is helping them to understand their abilities and how they can use it to best serve themselves and the future families they will have. So with that in mind, Amanda, Jennifer, it's yours.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for grounding us in our purpose. At this time, to really further explore your hopes for the Continuum and what the Continuum will accomplish, we've allotted time for a brief 5-minute breakout discussion in breakout rooms. So we're going to ask that each person in the group kind of briefly share your hope for the Continuum. And then at the conclusion of our allotted 5-minute time period, we'll bring you back to the group. So before I send you off into the Zoom world, any questions? All right. Amber and Bruce, if you'll help us send people off, and we'll see you in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. We're so excited to have you back and thankful that you engaged with us. We hope it was an insightful conversation. So to begin, we're just going to share some highlights of your discussions. So will someone from Group 1 share a couple of hopes the members have for this group?
I can go ahead and share for our group. There was a lot of excitement and energy. Just to name a few, and Jennifer, I can send you the notes for all of these great ideas that folks had. But I think we heard a call for excitement around the collaboration and opportunity to really learn from one another and learn from those that they may not have had the opportunity to really engage with in the past, and really being able to reach across the aisle and have kind of bipartisan solutions to better support students. I think it's really impressive. We had a student representative in our group, and so providing the opportunity for students to have a voice in this conversation was really excited. And then another one was the emphasis on measurable outcomes and immediate action. And I think there's a lot of energy and excitement from this group around really being able to put some of these strategies into practice by working together.
Great, thank you. Super insightful, Lauren. How about Group 2?
I'm going to turn to Lou.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure that was our right group. So yeah, riffing on what Lauren said too, a lot of excitement across the team, and a real commitment on the part of each person who spoke about their own aspirations to get some lift away from our silos, to break down those real and perceived barriers to do the work. A willingness to amplify the voices of everyone in our communities, including those stakeholders that are often marginalized in the process, and including students and families. And for me, aspirationally, I really take the governor and lieutenant governor at their word, and Aaron Thompson and Jason Glass and others. I think this work is about improving the prosperous future of all Kentuckians because we're going to get this right. We're going to stop the fits and starts and shoots and ladders and all of the things that go into our system right now to drag it down, and really commit to seamlessness for all Kentuckians.
I love it. Thank you, Dr. Young. How about Group 3?
Hi, everybody. My name's Lee Nimmix, and I was volunteered to provide the report out. Really good discussion, brief discussion, just sort of scraped along the top. But we had a comment about, now that we have a very effective data system, they're looking at the opportunity to go back with data and analytics and look at what classes lead to success. A lot of discussion about the need to really focus in on college access and affordability. Representative Tipton really zeroed in on this issue of lifelong learning, reminded us that education never stops, and that we really need to focus as a group on the education and training chain, and which links are strong and which are weak. And then finally, Eddie Campbell suggested that, or reminded us that we need to focus not just on the academic, but on the mental and physical well-being of all of our students.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lee. How about Group 4?
Hi, Jennifer. This is Ben Brandstetter. Thanks for getting us together. We had a diverse group in our discussion. The main themes were revolving around finding a system that works together for all the kids, and having a personalized education for those kids as they move through the P through 20 continuum. That also included closing the first generation achievement gap, and then finding ways to supplement the success through career counseling and college counseling.
Super important, Ben. Thank you. Appreciate it. Group 5.
Hi, I was voluntold to speak on behalf of Group 5, which Dr. Olika instantly proclaimed as the greatest group. So we'll see how that turns out. I think building on the themes that others have shared, many of the same things that the other groups reported out, we also discussed with an emphasis on the importance of those connections with each other. We're excited about the possibility because of who's at the table here, and also underscoring the importance of making sure that we're hearing from our students, especially our students who are underserved.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. You're absolutely right. And thank you, everyone, for engaging in our conversation. We hope to return to these. These are super important threads that we'll see certainly as we continue throughout our work. At this time, Dr. Glass, it's my privilege and honor to turn it over to you as Commissioner and Chief Learner at the Kentucky Department of Education and the co-chair of the Continuum. So near and dear to my heart, we're hoping you'll share some norms for us to get us started.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thanks, Amanda, for helping support this. Thanks, Lieutenant Governor and President Thompson. And President Thompson, just so you know, when you took Amanda and Jennifer away from the department, they didn't ask if that was okay. So I'm still getting over it. We're going to get past that together with this group. I'm looking forward to the support of everyone here to help me with that. But it's delight to continue working with them. One of the things that we should do as a group is identify some ways that we're going to work together. And I know this is a procedural step that some may be rolling their eyes about or have gone through before, but I do think it's important that we establish just some understandings about how we'll treat each other and how we will work together. The staff at CPE has put together some model norms for us to think about. What I'd like to do is have us read through those and then come to consensus around them, and also consider, are there norms that people object to that we need to change, or are there elements that we need to add? And so to facilitate that, what I'd like to do is have a volunteer, one at a time, raise your hand. And the way you raise your hand, at least if you have a screen like mine, you click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen. That will bring up a list of everyone. And then there's a raise hand icon that you can click on. So I'll ask for volunteers to raise your hand, read one norm, and then we'll pause and give people a moment to consider that. Then I'll ask for consensus. And so I'll look across the screen, look at everyone's face, and give me a high five if you agree with that, and give me a fist if you want to talk about it some more or change something. So high five if you really like it, and a fist if you don't. We'll learn as we go through this. But first, can I have a volunteer to read this first Continuum meeting norm? And I see Lisa has raised her hand. Lisa, please read that first norm for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Glass. We will be fully present at each meeting by becoming familiar with materials before we arrive and by being an active participant.
Thank you. So let's take a moment and consider that. And let me see your hands. A 5 if you agree, or a fist if you have a concern. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Just checking, make sure we got everybody. Okay, I'm not seeing any objections. Thank you. So I think we have consensus on that norm. And could another person, and it looks like I'm don't have the power to sort of lower people's hands. So one of the folks who is facilitating may have to help us do that. But can I get a volunteer to read the second norm, please? I'm gonna look through. Please raise your hand if you're able to do that. Thank you. Connie Murphy from Western. Please go ahead, or Corinne, I'm sorry. Go ahead and unmute yourself and read that second norm. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We will ensure consistency of member attendance to the best of our ability in order to continue meaningful conversations and attain Continuum goals.
Thank you. So we'll take just a moment and consider that one. Okay, well, let's see those hands. I think I was seeing consensus around that, and I'm checking all the screens, but please go ahead and make your voice heard if you object to that, but not hearing anything, I'll move forward. And I see Dr. Olika has volunteered to read the third statement. Go ahead, Dr. Olika.
We will invite and welcome the contributions of every member and listen to each other.
Thank you. Let's see consensus on that. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. And another volunteer for the fourth one. I see Carrie in here. Carrie, let's go ahead and let you do the fourth one. And Penny, let's have you on deck for the fifth one.
We will put ideas on the table to promote meaningful dialogue and discussion.
See consensus on that. Thank you. And seeing or hearing no objections. Penny, let's go ahead and have you read the fifth one.
Yes, sir. We will be involved to our individual level of comfort. Each of us is responsible for seeking clarity and understanding during the meeting.
Thank you. Consensus on that? Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Seeing consensus and not hearing any objections. Paul, let's go ahead and have you.
We will presume positive intentions to promote and facilitate meaningful and collegial discussions.
Thanks, everyone. Again, please speak up if I'm seeing an objection or someone that wants to talk more about one. And one final, Logan, please read the last one.
We'll be guided by the purpose of the Commonwealth Education Continuum, which focuses on success for all students.
Thank you. And any, well, let's see consensus on that. Thank you. No objections I'm seeing. So I'll open it up now and see if there's anyone who wants to be recognized to raise any norms that they think we should add to this. Is there something that we're missing that we want to bring forward? So please raise your hand if you have a norm that you'd like to raise, and then we'll recognize you and allow you to talk about that. Okay, I am not seeing any, and I will be a person who will offer one for your consideration. So the norm that I would ask that we consider is this, and I'll take a moment and type it in the chat here in just a moment so that we have it to look at. And that is that we will hear from, and more importantly, listen to students, particularly those students who have been historically underserved by our education system. So we will hear from, and more importantly, listen to our students, particularly those who have been historically underserved by our education system. Thank you. All right, any objections or further discussion about that one?
Dr. Glass, it's Penny.
Yes, thank you, Penny.
I don't know that we need an additional continuum, but when you speak about those students, inevitably we have to discuss the parents and the families, right? So how do we incorporate that without necessarily, continuing to add more to the list and making it?
Yeah, what if we amended what I just raised as another norm to say, listen to, and more importantly, hear from our students and families? Would that satisfy?
I'd like to add another addendum to that. Pretty soon it's going to be too long. But I would say, and also those that represent the students' needs.
Tell me more about that, Dr. Thompson.
Well, there are people out there, and we'll listen to, like college counselors, high school counselors. There'll be other representatives. There are people that are community folks, the Pritchard Committee as an example. There's a lot of people that are out there representing good policy, good process, and procedures. So I think we may have captured that, but I wanted to make sure, because I agree with Penny, to have families and because they may not be parents, right? We have many that are grandparents and other people that act like family. So I just want to make sure that we capture all those inputs.
Thank you. That's great. So I will add that, amend my suggested norm. I'll put it in the chat here and see what people think about that. So I've added, we will hear from, and more importantly, listen to our students, families, and those who represent and work with students, particularly those who are historically underserved by our education system. Dr. Thompson and Penny, do these get at your suggestions?
They do mine, yes.
Thank you. All right.
Sir,
Any
thank
other
you.
suggestions or revisions? Thank you. So this comes forth from a spirit of really making sure that we're listening closely to those that are most directly impacted by the decisions that people that are in this group make and whatever this group formally recommends. Looking ahead to what we have on the agenda today, we're going to see a lot of system level data and state level data that is really important. But behind that data, there are lots of stories. And there are experiences of students and families and practitioners who are leading to that larger state level data. So the value behind this norm really is to make sure that in the course of our discussions that we're lifting up those stories and experiences, and that's guiding the decisions that we make. So that's where this is coming from. Let's do one more time, a level of consensus 5 if you agree with this norm. Thank you, everybody. I think I'm seeing everyone. And fist if you have an objection or want to keep talking about it. And seeing none, please speak up if I'm missing somebody. But I think we have consensus around our norms, Amanda and Jennifer. I will turn things back over to you, and thanks everyone for allowing me a few minutes to go through this process with you.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Glass. It was time well spent, and these will be adjusted based on the feedback that we've received, and we'll have this available for every meeting just to keep us focused on how we interact as a group and really what we're aiming for. So actually that goes to our next slide, which is, hang on. The annual objective. So one of the things we've talked about that President Thompson referred to is that when this happened years ago, there's lots of good talk and great will, but the criticism was more action. We need to do more at a faster rate. And so one of the things that was a priority for us as we heard from the 3 co-leads and we started to formulate what this group could do is that we really wanted to set measurable outcomes that could have influence on the work that we do, whether that is a messaging system, whether that is talking through the pieces of policy, how things are implemented, really having a voice, which is why this group comes together with such different perspectives. So our annual objective is to develop and execute a specific plan to activate the biggest levers, and that's what we're going to be talking about today for increasing successful student transitions into post-secondary. And we know that this is an ongoing issue that has been exacerbated, with COVID. It is what keeps me awake at night, I'm not going to lie. And really, Commissioner Glass and really all of our leaders who've spoken today really hit the nail on the head of what can we do collectively to support and advocate and inform our students to seek continued education, to seek credentials, career pathways, degrees to help better their lives. And so David Mahan and I are going to share a few data slides. But before we do that, there's a couple things I want to keep into context. Number one, we are incredibly fortunate to have KY Stats and the amount of data, longitudinal data that we have in the state. It is a gift that many states are very, very jealous of. And so today we will hit a very high level view of just some things to start thinking about with the purpose of continuing this conversation, getting a little more weedy when you have the breakout groups and the conversations. We could go really deep into this data, and each slide could take a full day of really digging into the why and the how and the impacts on it. What we want you to start doing is thinking holistically about what do we know about Kentucky students? What do we know about them after they've graduated high school and what they've attained, even in the 7 years later? And we are so fortunate to have that. But ultimately, which really goes along with the theme of what everyone has talked about today, is that I ask is that you not look at this data as data points and numbers. They are not numbers, they are students. They are young citizens. And that's why I come to work every day, is to increase opportunity and access for Kentuckians. And so I hope that when you see the data, you don't see these as data points and numbers and bars, but that you see those as individuals and that we have work to do to further provide opportunities and access. And we have done many things. So this is definitely not a deficit. It is just a checkpoint for us to start the conversation to help narrow what our actionable items are going to be this year. So I'm going to have David go on and join me. And Jennifer, you can share the next slide, and then we'll definitely get into breakout groups and you'll have more than 5 minutes, I promise. So this slide I'm going to start off with, and David will definitely jump in. But what you're seeing here is, and this is one of my favorite slides to look at because it really hits home, is that these are the 2019 outcomes for the 2012 high school graduates. 7 years later, where are they? What have they attained? And so you can see at the bottom, this is, of course, from KY Stats. They do amazing things. So the total selected population is 43,277 students. And 7 years later, what have they attained? And so you can see on the left side, you can see how many attained only a high school diploma, a high school diploma with some college experience, meaning they did not complete a program, but they do have some college credit, earned a post-secondary certificate or diploma, so some type of an industry certification at a minimum one, maybe more, earned an associate's degree, and then earned a bachelor's degree or higher. The other side, if you look on the right side, is their median income. And so if you think about it, these students who are now adults, contributing members, families probably, they're 25 when this was produced. And so to look at the attainment and to look at their median income. And so just a couple points I'm going to bring up, and I know David will give us another perspective, but what stuck out to me is that we had 9,637 students after 7 years. So it didn't mean they have to just go straight from high school and complete. Some have different pathways. But after 7 years, 9,637, which is 22%, earned a bachelor's or above. Whereas students who stopped with either a high school diploma or high school diploma with some college, specifically with some college, which could mean debt for them if they had began their post-secondary career, as being 18,873. And that's 44% of the graduating class of 2012. And if you look at their median salary, which is $23,357, and if there was any debt that went along with that, obviously they're not making that much. Even if you look at those who earned a post-secondary certificate, that would have increased from their high school diploma to a certificate over $5,000 on their median salary, but we only have 1,484 take advantage of that. So that really hits home for me. You know, we have a lot of work to do, and it's not just about going to college. It's not just about getting a degree, but how do we really prepare them for careers and opportunities to be able to also provide for themselves and their families and sustain. So David, I know you had a few talking points as well on this slide.
I do, and thank you. I work at the CPE. I lead the Data Research and Advanced Analytics team. And as Amanda said, you know, one of our biggest challenges with this data system is to really bring it to action. And, you know, as everyone on this call knows, the information doesn't live in post-secondary or K-12 or in the workforce. It lives as one. And so we've been able to bring that together through KY Stats. And so we can look at reports like this and not only look at the overarching message, but if you go to this as an interactive report on the site, you can disaggregate by gender or by region of the state or by low income status, free and reduced lunch. And so it becomes very, very powerful. But my initial observation here, Amanda, is, you know, as you combine those three left-hand circles of the folks that did complete out of this class, you get to about 31%, right? So about half of what we're going to need to reach our 60 by 30 attainment goal. So that is 60% of Kentuckians would have a post-secondary credential by the year 2030. So right now we sit at 49.1%, and we are making great strides. But we have to do better in terms of this initial group as they're coming out of high school to get to a healthier place that will ultimately lead to that 60% goal.
We'll go on to the next slide. And again, you will have access to these in your small group. So we'll try to make up a little bit of time so we're not spending too much, but you will get to see these again and you will have access to them.
So this slide, and President Thompson talks about this slide often because it's really one of our most important. So if you think about those outcomes in terms of, the first slide, we often talk about completion once we have students enrolled in post-secondary education. But that's just part of the question. And maybe even the bigger question is getting students started in post-secondary education. So in other words, we can't make tremendous strides unless we do better than getting half of our graduates into a post-secondary program. And so as you probably imagine, this differs by those underserved groups. And so the male going rate, for example, is at 46%, the African-American 47%, Hispanic 48%, all below that 50.5. But we ultimately strive to get closer to the 69%, this national average. I get the question very frequently, do we pick up students in the second year, in the third year? Do some of our students go out of state because this is an in-state going rate? Those answers are all yes, but we never do reach that 69% on the national average, which really puts us in a place to move the needle on attainment and get more of our underserved students and families into middle-class wages. Next slide, please. As you can imagine, the college going rate also varies very much by geography. And so this is a heat map, if you will. And you see on the darker blue, those college going rates get into 75, 80, 85%. And on the light yellow, the light green, you really see the college going rates that are very much on the low side. These counties trend very much with median family income. And so those counties that are fortunate enough to have better resources have a better college going rate. President Thompson and the Gear Up folks often remind us that, it's not just about that culture of college going within the school or the district or the county, but it also, as we talked about earlier, is very much about the individual families. And so if you think about these counties where many of the young people are first generation college students, then that culture within the family is very important to address and articulate the benefits of earning a college credential.
And I just want to add on to that is that I think our schools have done a fantastic job really since 2010 to really focus on future stories for students. And my hope is as we see these graduating classes from 2011, 2012, and as they grow, I really think a lot of our communities and especially our area tech centers and the way we started talking about careers and really expanding what's out there for students, I'm hopeful to see that those colors change as we go. And I know this is from 2018, but I do think that the culture has changed on what we discuss and what's possible. And if not, that may be something we need to address. So we'll keep going, but keep your mind going.
So many of you have seen affordability and financial aid metrics. There's certainly a lot in the media these days. We typically focus on what's called net price. And just to remind folks on the call what net price includes, it's not just the tuition and fees, but it's also the room and board and that spending money, those transportation costs, the book costs, those miscellaneous pieces that we know go into every student's college experience. And so when we look at this, we look at the overall cost of attendance, and then we back out the federal aid, the state aid, the institutional aid that is in the form of grants and scholarships, that money that does not have to be paid back. And ultimately, you get to a place of what's called the net price. And so then we look at this over time, and in this case, it's over 7 years, and we disaggregate by the sector, the research universities, U of L and UK, the comprehensives universities, and then CTCS partners. And you can really see some good news in the last 2 to 3 years that we're stabilizing in terms of net price. And so this is something that we keep a really close eye on. One of the big levers at the council is the negotiation of tuition increases with our universities and with KCTCS. And the fact that there's been such a good faith effort made to keep this cost down. This is also a metric that can be disaggregated on our website by family income. So if you wanted to look at just those low income families, you could see what they're paying at the various sectors. But it's very important to keep a close eye on this and better understand the reality of college cost as opposed to a lot of the anecdotes that are out there in the media.
So that gets us into continue to talk about the affordability. And the one thing we talk a lot around here is that regardless of where you go or where students go, you never pay the sticker price. And but that's not always communicated. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is Fafsa Completion. And people are like, why is that such a big deal? It's huge, actually. It's a key opening door to federal aid for students. It is an opportunity to see for them to complete and see if they are eligible for aid. And many times it's 90%, and this is nationwide, 90% of students who complete the FAFSA go on to directly enroll in post-secondary compared to 55% who are non-completers. Now, I will admittedly tell you, FAFSA is not as friendly as it could be in many of the communities in our state and nationwide. Work really hard to help families with the form. I know that there's talk that this July the form will change, and I know that the post-secondary world is more than excited, but really so should P12, because if it makes it more accessible, then we should absolutely do it. I will tell you that if you notice on the slide, we are down 20% compared to completion rates of last year. It has been very challenging, and I know I'm speaking to the choir, especially with Kyle being on here representing school counselors and many of my P20 colleagues. It's very, very difficult to reach the students, especially if it's virtual, to be that constant reminder, that advocate, that help. And I know the universities are feeling that too with admissions and reaching out to the students and those. So this is something that's really important that we promote. We're coming together collectively. I know we've talked to our friends at Kia and KDE and of course CPE, Gear Up. We're really in, well, gosh, lots of groups, but we're trying to get the word out about FAFSA, but it is low right now, which takes away opportunities for students. That's something that we can talk about collectively as a group of how do we encourage this to really help students to see that it is possible, that their futures are possible.
So an area that we have focused on in our research agenda, and we have also aligned our research agenda at the CPE with KY Stats research agenda, is to look at dual credit and the effect it's having on students in early college, what we call early college outcomes. The first thing that we will say is that dual credit has a strong association with college going rates. So you see that 40.5% the non-participants versus 75 to 80% college going rate for those that do have one dual credit experience. And that could be anything from AP, IB to Cambridge to a dual credit course. What's very interesting about these outcomes, you see at the bottom, the first year GPA and the credit hours, and we will add second year retention as well. We have a research project that's going to be released in February around KCTCS and the dual credit experiences there and the students that matriculate to our KCTCS campuses. What we have found in these outcomes is that no matter the pathway, no matter this demographic group, no matter the geography, we're seeing positive impact of dual credit on these outcomes. So in other words, you often hear the question of, well, Dave, you tell us that the outcomes are better for dual credit. Well, that's pretty obvious because the best students take dual credit, or the most precocious, or the most advantaged in terms of socioeconomic. No, we were controlling for those factors, and we're still looking at dual credit to see if it has the impact on the low-income students, the underprepared students, the students of color. And what we're finding is really positive results. And so we're going to work hard to take that message to the street. There's been so much growth in dual credit from 5 years ago to about 23,000 students. Now we're up to 41,000 students participating, 75% growth. And we should continue to do more because the outcomes are indisputable.
So just
David,
to
let me
touch.
jump in and say quickly, though, that we still have an underrepresented amount by proportion of our low-income and students of color. Even though they've had the greater outputs, this is really one of those potholes that we need to be working on in a P20 sort of way.
Yes, and I failed to talk about access with this. So within that growth, it hasn't been the same trend across all the demographic groups. But what President Thompson is alluding to is we have found an even stronger impact on these early post-secondary outcomes for the students that need it the most. And so that's where we can really communicate the message and bring it to action.
And this is also a point of growth, but a point where we've really come a long way. I'm sure most of you know, but I want to make sure and point out that our students did have financial barriers removed because we are incredibly fortunate to have the dual credit scholarship, the Work Ready scholarship. We also have, which I'll speak to at the next slide, but even for advanced coursework, for the exams for students who qualify for free or reduced lunch to be able to cover those fees. That's a huge financial barrier. The scholarship is for all students who are able to meet the criteria to take dual credit, and that is technical education or traditional academic general education courses. So we're extremely fortunate to have that, but to Dr. Thompson's point, we have work to do to ensure that access is truly available, and there's lots of contributing factors. So like I said, this is to start the conversation, but there are lots of questions that probably come to mind and discussion points from your perspective. And this is just to show, as David was mentioning, we do have Cte Certificate Completions. We know that when students complete pathways, when they take advanced coursework, even if they don't pass the test, the experience of the rigorous vocabulary and expectation of the courses, whether that be advanced placement, international baccalaureate, Cambridge, we have very few who use international baccalaureate or Cambridge in the state, and then dual credit, all those early post-secondary opportunities do increase the likelihood of students to pursue post-secondary education or additional certifications. And so that's something we want to see continue to grow, and we do have support. Luckily, in the state, financial support from our General Assembly, which we are greatly appreciative of. So that's something we need to look to continue to enhance and improve. So with those opportunities, this gets us into college readiness. And I will tell you, David will be able to speak to it with more detail and will briefly, but you'll say, well, gosh, now they're coming in and they're not ready. The readiness in the post-secondary world that I've quickly learned is really about placement in their gateway courses, whether they have co-requisite support or if they're able to sustain on their own. And so that's where you're seeing some of the changes. And I'll turn that over to David on what are we seeing on the post-secondary side.
So this college readiness, as Amanda said, is very much about the population that did matriculate or did enroll at KCTCS or public universities. So if you're looking at this and thinking, that seems a little on the high side, that's because, we are looking at just those students that have already been admitted or already enrolled, at KCTCS or public universities. So what I can tell you is that this measure has evolved quite a bit. So at one time it was that classic ACT of 18, 19, and 20, which was English, math, and reading, to evolve to other standardized exams and then campus placement exams and now dual credit. And so this number goes higher. But what we have found is that's okay because we're really interested in identifying those students that need what we call co-requisite support. So at one time, this was ultimately pushing students into the pathways of remediation or developmental coursework. Now it's pushing in students into co-requisite, which is allowing students to stay on the same pace, take credit-bearing courses with their colleagues who are, quote, prepared or ready, but give our underprepared students additional supports embedded in the coursework so that they don't fall behind. And so we're seeing preliminary results on the implementation of this program and better success rates in terms of completion of courses and retention and graduation rates based on this co-requisite model. So this college readiness measure is very much about identifying those students that need additional support as opposed to in previous time when it was much about the remediation.
And then this slide for KDE College and Career Readiness, for those who are on the P12 side, speaking to post-secondary, are not talking about the same type of measures. And so the reason we wanted to show you this is we know that the accountability system has changed. Those who have endured it or had to change the policy, it's a lot of work to do that. There were shifts that actually started in 2018. So when you look at that graph, the goal that we wanted to show you is just that there are serious disparities that were mentioned before, that we have work to do. Even though the system changed in 18 officially, it still was lacking the dual credit piece, which was called then changed to transition readiness. So we went from lots of assessments for career and technical education to be career ready, or what they used to call college ready, with other assessments. That shifted based on feedback. We had ESSA flexibility. We've had a couple of different leaders and lots of input and legislation changes. But beyond even the changes that took place in those readiness indicators, you still see there's a disparity. And that's something that we don't want to look past. We need to address and know that in order for students to be ready, they have to be well prepared, and then as they transition to sustain and know what to do. And so that's the ownership of all of us. So in order to do these things, it takes us into the next slide, which really talks about our teacher workforce. And we know that these things cannot happen without a strong teacher workforce that's also provided support and opportunities to grow and learn. It was one of the hardest jobs in my career pathway for sure, and I honor each role that I took responsibility for throughout. And this is a big one at all levels. And so, David, if you want to share this graph.
I do. And so this is a sneak peek at some research that we're going to release in February, which in conjunction with our KDE partners, we've asked MZ to look at econometrics and projections around supply and demand. Do we have enough graduates in our teacher prep programs to meet the need going through 2030? And you can see those gaps. It's a pretty simple line graph here that, you know, we're really going in the wrong direction in terms of the number of teacher candidates. And so we have to, you know, continue to recruit more students into teacher preparation programs. Oftentimes we'll get the question of, you know, is it a pipeline question in terms of getting more young folks interested or returning adults interested, or is it a teacher retention and salary question? And so the short answer is, you know, it's a little bit of both, but you can see from this slide, we're really struggling in just getting more folks interested in this career, because once we get them interested in this career, the success rates of getting into the classroom are pretty healthy.
David, I'm sorry, but could you just say a little bit more? I want to make sure I'm reading the graph correctly.
Okay, yes, I'm glad you interrupted, because that was, and it's probably, you know, in so much information being presented at once, we probably need to take a little more time. So that top line there, that top horizontal line of the job openings that require a baccalaureate or higher in the education sector, which is teacher prep, you know, in a given year, we're looking at, you know, right around that 4,000. And we're comparing that 4,000 in 28-29 to the number of projected graduates from teacher preparation programs in the state of Kentucky. And so if we maintain where we are right now, we're still at that 2,800. So we still have a gap there. And the line below that is showing that if we can't maintain and we continue a downward projection, the gap will get even bigger, you know, if we are not able to recruit more students into these programs with our public universities, IQ, and other preparation programs.
Thank you very much.
And to finish up on our slides, also, when we talk about gaps and disparities, we also have to look at the diversity of our teacher workforce. And I will say this is a priority of KDE and the Lieutenant Governor of CPE. We really are working together with KDE being in the lead on this, of having several efforts around traditional pathways as well as alt-cert and different ways to recruit folks, teacher residency programs. There's lots of great work in action that we know many of our universities are doing and that are putting great efforts into diversifying our teacher workforce. But just to give you a little bit of an idea, this is our 2020 report. So in Kentucky, students are 2.3 times more likely to be male than teachers, 3.2 times more likely to be Black than teachers, our students. And in Kentucky, students are 8.9 times more likely to be Hispanic than their teachers. And so really the need to diversify our teacher workforce to better reach our students, for all students with that experience is a huge need in our state. It's a national issue, but it's something that we in Kentucky definitely want to own. And I think that there's great work moving in that direction. So I don't share this slide to say there's nothing happening. Actually, it's quite the opposite. And I'm encouraged by the work that we're doing together. I know that Dr. Thompson and the staff, even way before I got here, really started to place an emphasis on cultural competence and really preparing faculty and students with a different perspective, with taking on the different biases that we have and being culturally responsive to our society. And so we're hopeful that this also has an impact on our teacher workforce and our K-12 or P-12 as well. So I'm going to stop there. You have had major data dive issues, which we typically don't chunk this all together, but I'm going to turn over to Jennifer, and you're going to have an opportunity to share. Clearly, there have also been comments in the chat. We will capture those and actually share those as well with you, and we'll be able to respond to make sure we are identifying your question or answering your question or getting any clarification that you may need. So Jennifer, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda and David, for sharing this data and absolutely for spurring our thinking and especially for keeping our focus on students. We appreciate that. So it's my favorite part always. We're going to further explore the data in breakout groups. We've allotted roughly 20 minutes for this to happen, in which we want to really consider what's been shared and help chart our future efforts. So each of you, just as before, has been assigned to a breakout room with the same facilitator who's going to lead you in a discussion focused on the 3 questions you see on the screen. What resonates or what stood out to you? 2, what's missing or what else do you need to know? And 3, where do you see the biggest opportunities to leverage improvements? Really focusing on 3 as well. So don't worry, within your breakout group, your facilitator will have access to the data slides and we'll be happy to share those should it be helpful. Your facilitator also will be taking notes during your discussion so we can distribute those to everyone after the meeting, and especially for transparency, these notes will be made available to the public and the individual rooms that you're in will be recorded. To help with pacing, when we have approximately 5 minutes remaining, I'll broadcast a reminder to the breakout rooms. Otherwise, again, don't worry, your facilitator will help keep you on target. Before you return to the main room, your facilitator will give you some directions on what to expect next. But before we release you again, any questions that we might answer?
Facilitators, be sure to turn on your record option once you are in your breakout room.
I'm not seeing any questions unless anyone else does. So with that, Amber, if you'll send us off our way. Happy discussions, everyone. See you soon. It's great to see you. Thank you. I hope you had a great conversation engaging with your facilitators and group members. At this time, we wanted to be sure we heard a high-level overview from each of the groups. So before I hand it over to the presenters, I want to establish a norm. I told you I love my norms, so for sharing your group's feedback. So for this segment of the agenda, we're going to use what's called the Give One, Get One protocol, where each presenter will give us insight on their group's feedback, being careful not to duplicate the work. So while the presenter is sharing the information, thus giving one, if this is information you didn't discuss in your group or would like to take note, you might do so. And in this sense, you're getting one. You may also consider making note of the commonalities. I bet we'll have a bunch shared by other groups. So if you get to share and you don't have information that's new to give, please just share kind of a high-level overview on the commonalities that you noted. So with that, I'll turn it over to group one. Again, you're sharing your feedback to question number 3, which was, where do you see the biggest opportunities to leverage improvements?
All right, so we are group 1. Rhonda, do you mind if I put you on the spot? We were zoomed back out just as we were assigning volunteers to share out, but our group really focused on teacher pipeline issues. And so Rhonda, if you wouldn't mind sharing with the full group. I think you're still on mute. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. So much of our conversation focused on the educator profession, sustaining it, considering that public education is the cornerstone of our societies across the state of Kentucky, and that educators, they're holding the one big pillar. And so not only is it a conversation of recruitment, it's also a conversation of working conditions and sustaining those who are currently in the profession for the long term. I personally gave example. I have 2 teachers in my family who are not quite to the 5-year mark, and I'm very concerned that they will not make it. And with every conversation that I have with colleagues across the state, it's the same everywhere we go. And when we delved a little bit deeper with the wonderful student in our group, Priya, who is here on the screen as well, Senator Weiss was so just said, I'd like to hear from her. What do you think about what you're hearing? And she was able to give very specific examples in terms of being a high school teacher, or I mean a high school student, and the conversations around her. Number one, the conversations, and these are not quotes from her, so my interpretation, but the conversations of educators while she was in school, they were not positive in terms of salary. And of course, a lot of pension noise was taking place during this time, and protest at the Capitol. And so the end result is students in her age group are not receptive or open to teaching as a profession. And so we start with teachers, but then we look to principals. And now we're lucky to maintain a principal for 5 years. And the superintendency in most cases is 1 contract. We see more and more of that. And so that entire profession, we need a lot of support in terms of from recruitment all the way to retirement, and making their working conditions and raising their profile as professionals in our state of Kentucky. So thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda, and thank you, Group 1. Group 2, what new insights can you share with us?
I'm going to turn to Corinne.
Thanks, Ryan. So we spoke a lot about the slide referencing access to early post-secondary options, comparing the different kinds of post-secondary options, AP, college credit, dual credit, and also speaking specifically about students of color and low income students and their access points for those opportunities. We also discussed the success within those opportunities. So what do the services look like that would support a high school student's ability to complete that dual credit course at the same level that we would expect a college student to complete that course? And so that preparation and that wraparound concept, and how do we incorporate that into a high school setting was a big part of our discussion as well. We did turn our attention to focus on teacher preparation and pipeline issues a bit towards the end, but we were pretty enthusiastic about our conversation around dual credit at the start. So as far as pathways for any of the career choices, definitely making sure that the communication around what those pathways are, whether it's a pathway to technical or whether it is a pathway to teacher preparation or whatever that pathway happens to be, the communication between the entities of higher education and high school needs to be there so that students can get credit for the work that they did in high school. So it's not as though we are at a point where they've completed all of these dual credit opportunities in high school, but they don't count towards that post-secondary option. And so that's where we focused, and we thought there's some room for us as a Commonwealth to make up some ground.
Great. Thank you, Corinne, for sharing, and thank you, Group 2. Group 3, let's hear your new insights.
Okay, so the first thing we focused on, it really was a thread throughout all three questions, but we really discussed the Fafsa issue and the importance of trying to get the word out and remobilizing. How do we, fall back and punt and get parents and families to understand the importance of filling out FAFSA, because you can't do anything without FAFSA, right? Even if you don't need all of the grants and the loans, you can't even, 99% of the schools in the country, you can't get a scholarship unless you filled out the FAFSA, right? So it's about information. We talked about statewide movements and initiatives to try and get that out there and really try and make a push for that to get them to understand that. And we also talked about how this can impact how we need to redefine, define equity, but not in the terms that people think it is, because we talked about the rural and urban divide. There are huge issues that are going on in the rural parts of Kentucky that are not addressed because, as I said, at least legislatively, all roads go through Louisville. So Jefferson County tends to be the mindset. If it's not happening in Jefferson County and it should, then we need to push it. If it's happening in Jefferson County and it shouldn't, and it shouldn't, then that's an issue. So that also falls into FAFSA, right? And I don't remember who said it, if it was Representative Tipton, where he talked about how in rural Kentucky, it could have been Mr. Campbell, this notion of not even having the thought of going to school is why I'm not going to waste my time filling out that FAFSA, right? I'm not going to go to college. I can't do it. My family needs me. No one else in my family has ever done it. So that was really the focus of what we did.
Thank you, Penny. Super insightful and spot on. And thanks to Group 3. Group 4, let's hear your insight.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. We also touched on the FAFSA. I guess I could kind of summarize the discussion by saying that what we really talked about was creating a seamless pathway to college. And that can take a lot of different forms, not only the traditional high school to college pathway, which we've talked about earlier today, but also in getting people to finish the degrees that they have already made progress on in order to get to that, in order to get to a bachelor's degree, because you can see on the one chart that we've got that was shared with everybody, the additional value add that's provided by that. And so those are that's what we discussed in Group 4.
Thanks, Ben. That first slide's super powerful, isn't it? I appreciate you guys sharing that. And thanks to all your group members. Group 5, let's hear your new insights.
Well, first, we obviously echoed everything that was said through Groups 1 through 4, so I want to get that point out there. Largely, our conversation was focused on the qualitative aspect of things. The data we've looked at really so far has been really good, but what does it mean? What stories do they actually tell? And how are we making sure that we're focusing on the real lived experiences of people who might be having the different challenges? For example, we saw the stats of the folks who weren't successful, but where are they? Are they particular groupings of folks? For example, are they rural Black boys, again, to combine a lot of the conversations that we've had today, who are the folks that aren't successful, or with something like dual credit, are students, low-income students in particular, taking dual credit courses, and then therefore they're not taking AP courses. And as a result, they're getting less KEYS money, which was brought up in terms of being a financial issue for students. So basically looking at that, and as well as high school culture in terms of different schools and whether or not they're promoting college to begin with. So again, really trying to look at things from a qualitative, more granular perspective. That way, the solutions that we ultimately come up with, because we don't want to rush to solutions without first really identifying the clear targeted problems. But the solutions that we come up with are specific, they're regional if they need to be, and they're looking at direct populations where the benefit can be absolute, as opposed to broad and macro saying, well, let's just do this for everybody and not focusing on the qualitative details.
Thank you, OJ. Thank you, Group 5. What a great conversation. I think this really speaks to the power of this continuum and the conversations that will kind of move us going forward. Not to diminish our time. I know we could keep going for a very long time, but I do want to thank you again for engaging this part of the meeting. As mentioned earlier, we will compile a collective notes document incorporating each group's feedback, and we do commit to distributing this to each of you prior to our next meeting. But with that, Dr. Ellis, I'll turn it back to you for final thoughts.
Yeah, so just a few things to wrap up with, and then we will let our co-leads do the final farewell, and I am committed to being done on time. That is a big, important piece to me. So again, thank you for your engagement today and your input and for staying with us. I know that's difficult virtually. But as Jennifer was saying, you know, our goal today was to glean clarity on the purpose and objectives, and you're helping us to drive those actionable items for the levers that are going to move Kentucky students and citizens into that post-secondary piece. What can we do collectively? And I think what you brought up today are very relevant and doable things. So we will definitely take your input. That's why we had the 5 facilitators capture what you're saying. We recorded it. And then the questions you've asked in the chat, we will respond to make sure that we have the data points you're seeking or clarity. The other point is if you have not already done your membership biography, please do so. We'll include that link when we do a follow-up. Many of you already done that, but it just includes a little bit about your background and email address if you want to share that. But really for folks to get to know what perspectives are coming to the table, it's really important. And then also we do have a date set for the next meeting. It is I know it's never going to be perfect for every single person, but we're doing the very best we can. So to be March 25th from 2 to 4, of course, we will send a reminder, and that will be in our follow-up email, and we will send the Zoom link as soon as possible because we know how incredibly crazy busy you guys are, especially at this time. We are definitely going to follow up. If you have any other thoughts or concerns, you are absolutely welcome to reach out to us, and we are happy to address. And there will be a doodle poll at the end that will be found in the chat box for you to give us some feedback about today. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Thompson to begin the co-lead way to say goodbye, I guess, for you guys to finish this up.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Amanda, for your facilitation of this. It is important that we recognize that doing this stuff isn't easy, and we have people behind the scenes doing all the work, and we're here on the screen. I want to make sure that I give my partners in good stuff here, not crime, in good stuff, their opportunity to say one last word, then I'll come back and do thank you for everybody. Commissioner Glass, I'm going to start with you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson, and thanks everybody for a great conversation and kickoff to this. I know that there's been a lot of excitement about this group coming together, and I think because of the capacity that it has to do something important and meaningful for kids in our state. I'll repeat something that I raised earlier with our small group, and it's important at this moment. I think we have an opportunity right now at the outset to slow down and make sure that we are focused on the right problem. And I want to just repeat that we're focused on the right problem or problems. Sometimes when we look at big system data, we can jump to macro level solutions and we can make inferences about what we need to do and what changes that need to happen. But we really haven't slowed down to understand where the root of the problem is and what really needs to happen. And so I'll just conclude with that note of thanks again, and to ask that we slow down and make sure that we hear and we focus on the right problem.
Thank you, Commissioner. Lieutenant Governor.
You'd think I'd have that by now. I agree. Thank you so much, Commissioner, and Dr. Thompson, Jennifer, and Amanda for all the work that you've done. I am just really excited about this very pivotal, critical, foundational work. You know, I've always heard folks talk about economic development and how to improve Kentucky, how to bring businesses here, how to create more jobs, how to do all of those things. And I've always found myself getting frustrated at that because truly the answers, the future of our economy is in our classroom today. And I know that everyone in this group is committed to these large scale challenges, but we're committed to them because of the kids in the seats in those classrooms. And I'm grateful for that. And I do believe that this is a group that can truly move things forward. And I would add that, you know, Dr. Glass said we need to make sure that we identify the correct challenges. I would also say that we need, when we think about improving systems, it's not always more. You know, sometimes it may be that we need to improve certain areas, and that may mean adding or removing barriers that exist. And so one of the things I always say coming out of this pandemic, and I'll end with this, is we're all in a rush to get back to normal. I know I am, to get back to the way things used to be. My charge to you, all of you, would be, let's consider what's not worth going back to, because this is the vehicle that can move us forward in terms of innovation and create new opportunities for kids in different ways than we never imagined before we were impacted by this worldwide health pandemic. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Dr. Thompson.
Excellent words, and from both of the co-chairs here, because I think it is important that we look at the right challenges, the right problems. I'm going to add one more. We've got to find the right solutions. Just to talk about these isn't good enough anymore. Just to identify isn't good enough anymore. And as an old sharecropper son from Eastern Kentucky, that education became not just my way out, but it became my way in. It gave me something that I can use to make sure that I can help other people to know the value of it. It's connecting us with this bigger set of humanity that makes us all better. We have to find these right solutions by inviting a lot more people to the table and listening to them. They've got directions to point us. I really appreciate Penny's statement earlier. As someone from Eastern Kentucky, I will have a different set of problems, and thus maybe need a different set of solutions by comparison to someone from an inner city. It is important for us, though, to realize that you're all around the table for a reason. You're around the table because you're bringing to us a way to help us to look at the problems, but more importantly, the way to help us to find solutions. The idea that we should be weeding teachers in and not weeding teachers out is a good example. The idea that we have a story to tell, you know, not that we need to get out there more, but our stories should be given to the students in high school and in elementary school to let them know the value of education and why we became teachers, why we became whoever we are. They should never, ever have the opportunity to say that I don't belong in that place for whatever reason. They should have the opportunity of saying, that's my choice and I made a good choice. So I challenge all of us to think about the solutions we bring to the table. I challenge all of us to know that we're a part of this great Commonwealth, and we will make the great Commonwealth even better. I appreciate those of us who are in policy roles, those of us who are in the legislature, those of us who are in the executive branch, those of us who represent other constituency around this table. Who do we need to bring to the table? How do we need to look at data? I love data, but it tells us a story, OJ, you're right. So how do we tell that story, and how then do we use that story as a mechanism, as a method, and as a process that allows us to do what we've been charged to do? Thank each of you. I appreciate every one of you, and thanks very much to those of us who will be continuing to double down on this work. Thanks, Amanda and Jennifer.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.